Now, they plan to meet in Times Square. I'm shutting down the podcast. I can't read another page. What the? What? Percy, I thought you were a New Yorker. What's good? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I'm a 30-year-old man who never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid, but I'm reading them now as an adult because I'm on a quest to determine if this is a book series that we've all been sleeping on as a society. And I'm not on this quest alone, though. I am joined in person here with me in New York City. It's Stephen Parra. Stephen, how's it going?
It's going great, Mike. It's kind of weird, it just being the two of us for once.
I know, not live, not over any sort of Zoom call, not in anywhere else other than my fun, cozy home setup that we've probably posted on the TNO Instagram at this point, where we're surrounded by books and velvety curtains in the place I'm subletting. It's a good vibe here for this book podcast.
Oh yeah, it's very cozy. Very on brand, must say.
Yes, all of the dampening is brought to you by literal books. So that will be what reduces the echo. But we are here to discuss the fourth book, specifically chapter 13 of Percy Jackson and the Battle of the Labyrinth. Now, you've been on a bunch. Have I asked you all of the questions for guest stuff? I've asked you how you found the books. I've asked you Godly Parent. Asked you Nectar and Ambrosia?
I think we did it at the live show.
But it wasn't specifically because of the guest question. I'm trying to think if there's any other question to do. I feel like with Kelly, I've only reached this point and I'm just like, they know who you are. And then I move on. So I guess I'll just ask you, are you excited for the TV show now that as of today, February 2nd, 2023, they finished all of the principal filming and it says it's completely wrapped?
Dude, I am so excited for the TV show. I can't even, oh my gosh, it's going to be great.
I think it's going to be very good.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Seeing Lance Reddick as Zeus, I'm like super psyched for that.
It's so good. Yeah. It's such good casting. Joel Rochester and I just gushed over that casting for 10 minutes in the last time we spoke about it. And oh man, I'm so hyped. I'm so hyped.
Oh, it's going to be so great.
It's going to be nice. And I think it is also going to be nice for my agenda, which is I feel like the show's going to come out just about as I wrap up covering PJO stuff on the pod, which will be super nice because I think it's going to come out in early 2024. So that will allow me to finish book 4 and book 5 over the course of 2023. I'll probably get in those spinoff books. Like I'm going to do the Demigod Files in between books 4 and 5 because I know that's how it goes. In general, a lot of folks ask this from time to time, but basically I'm going release order with everything. Though I think the Pyramid spin-off books are in between. I think I'm going to skip those.
It's going to get a little funky once we're done with the core series. You know, you'll just have to probably want to talk to the Olympic court about what they're wanting us to do next. But.
Yeah, I will be talking to our Ultra God tier patrons who also are the Olympic court, where they get to help me decide what I cover. There will be lots of polls basically asking, hey, what do I do? But as far as the Percy Jackson stuff, I think I'm going to go release order, especially with the books and stuff. And then I'll try to cover the movies and the musical, and we'll have to do some sort of live stream riff tracks component, kind of like we did with the Hades stream that we just did recently. Do that for the movies where me, you, Kelly, Johnny, whoever else is around, we watch the films and, you know, can't stream the film because I don't want Disney to sue me, but at the very least, we could do a, okay, hit play now type situation.
Oh, for sure. I think it'd be so much fun. A lot of people are curious if we're going to do something like that. Yeah. So rest assured.
Right. Legally, I cannot straight up stream the film, but we could stream a viewing party and then I could tell people, hello, watch this. And then extra caution, putting it on Patreon. It's also a nice way to thank the patrons. But then also it's nice for not being super public and all of that. Just kind of extra layer of not getting sued by Disney. A thing I really don't want to have happen to me ever.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty smart way to live, right?
Yeah, I should get like a WWJD thing, but it says like, what would I do to not get sued by Disney? So WWIDNTGSBD. I'll make those. And then I'll just wear that and be like, yes, right. Maybe don't make merch that looks just like something that is licensed. Cool. Anyway, Percy Jackson, we're here to talk about chapter 13 of book 4. Book 4, you enjoyed book 4, yeah?
I do enjoy book 4. You know, last time I was on, it was book 3, actually. Right. You talked to me back then, like, what was my favorite book in the series? And then I said book 3. I think I would still say book 3 at this point, but, like, picking between books 3, 4, and 5 is, like, a really hard thing to do. I think as you've seen, this series just kind of starts on the ground running, is great, and it just gets better as you go. And I think what's been cool to see with like the listeners of the show too is that between 3, 4, and 5, a lot of people have different opinions. Like people like them in equal measures for different reasons, and so I like this book a lot, especially like with all the stuff that you've gotten to see so far. We're seeing the gangs all back together. We're not losing somebody running off or getting captured. It's just all the people we love trying to do something. And it's great.
Yeah, it's been really fun. It's been all over the place, and it feels like it's been more than 12 chapters. Like so much has happened. I feel like just in terms of stuff happening in the book so far perspective, I feel like way more than half a book's worth of stuff has happened. Because in this chapter, we get the situation where Percy is reminded about the school. And I was like, oh my God, that feels like 12 years ago. But let's get into it. Chapter 13 is called We Hire a New Guide. Now, where we last left our heroes, we have just a very fun, cool, not crushing chapter at all. Super happy. Everyone is good, and nobody had to cry themselves to sleep on the floor or inside their bathtub or whatever after reading chapter 12, and Percy was on his magical raft home. Now, my guess here for chapter 13 was that someone is going to lead him through the labyrinth. Obviously, that was discussed in the Hephaestus situation. My first thought was Clarice. My second thought was please don't be Juniper. And then my third thought was Rachel Elizabeth Dare, because that was kind of hinted at a little bit with the whole someone who could see situation. So those are my guesses. And we'll just have to see. Percy arrives at Camp Half-Blood, and he's not sure how. This is another instance of I buy it from the narrator not telling you, though.
Yeah.
Sometimes used as a plot device of, I don't want to write this thing, so I don't know. But when you're literally on an island that appears to be in a different plane of existence, I feel like you get a pass for not really knowing how you go from magical different land to Long Island. I don't know how that connects. There's not a Lear route that goes out there.
The literal opposite of a magical land.
And we'll keep going so that the Long Island listeners, all 12 of them, don't get upset. Okay, now he gets to Camp Half-Blood, and as he's approaching the shore, great white sharks guide him to shore. Don't know that they actually inhabit the Long Island Sound, but he's the sea godson, so sure, yeah.
I would hope not. I've swam in that ocean, and that would not make me very happy.
No, yeah, I'm going to double check before I get into Long Island Sound next time that this is purely a work of fiction and has no basis in reality. So when he arrives at camp, it looks empty despite it being the late afternoon, which should be a pretty busy time. And basically, Percy walks in on his own funeral. He enters while Chiron is wrapping up the bad news to the campers. And Annabeth, who I thought, okay, she's back. Great. Glad she's safe. She made it out of the labyrinth, made it back to camp. She is full of tears, and she starts to speak as Percy works his way through the crowd. And eventually she sees him and draws attention to the fact that he is in attendance. Everybody's shocked. Beckendorf is hyped. Love that. Love me some Beckendorf. And Percy starts to get pats on his back from some of the campers. He gets curses from the Aries cabin kids, and he gets an eye roll from Clarice. Classic stuff.
I really love that piece of this chapter, actually, because like Rick is so efficient with just like a paragraph or two, fleshing out some of these characters at gang campers, like giving them a real personality and building on them in very short measure. We don't always hear much from Beckendorf, but it always makes us smile. Love Beckendorf. Clarice, I remember like she rolls her eyes because she's like annoyed that he has the audacity to survive, which I think is so funny.
And then understandably and relatably for a 12-year-old or 14-year-old or however old you are kid, you're not going to care if he almost died if you don't like him. If the kid in school you don't like almost dies and it comes back, you're not old enough to realize how bad of a look it is to be like, oh man, this guy's back. I kind of liked the better when I thought he was dead. So Chiron then lets out a sigh of relief, and he tells Percy how relieved he is to see him, and he begins to ask Percy how he managed it, but then Annabeth interrupts to yell, "Where have you been?" because she loves him so much. Percy anticipates a punch in the face, but instead receives a very fierce hug, and then Annabeth says, We thought you were dead, Seaweed Brain. Nice. Almost save Annabeth to reveal that you are worried sick about him because you love him. Percy apologizes and says that he got lost, and Annabeth goes, "Lost!" And she reveals that Percy has been gone for 2 weeks, which is quite a bit of time. We knew that the time was a bit of a question mark in Calypso land, but he has been gone for 2 weeks, which is quite some time, and it honestly makes me the most worried about Tyson and Grover. I guess time goes faster there, so it's not going to feel like 2 weeks for them, but The fact that they are still a question mark makes me worried about how their little side quest has gone.
Oh, for sure.
Chiron says that they should discuss this matter privately. Annabeth is getting quite heated. So he picks up the two of them like baby kittens, slings them over his shoulders, and he heads with them towards the big house. Percy doesn't give them the whole story. He talks about how he caused the explosion at Mount St. Helens. He says that he was marooned on an island and that Hephaestus saved him with a magic raft. Annabeth again mentions the 2-week disappearance, but now she does so a little more calmly, and she still looks really shaken up. She thought Percy was dead, and he says that he knows and that he's sorry, and he also tells her that he knows how to navigate the labyrinth, which is very exciting.
Yeah, it's like, it wasn't a complete waste of time.
No, I did get some cool information that I already knew, but I realized that the answer was right in front of me. The way through the labyrinth is the friends we met along the way.
Of course.
Of course. And I mean, kind of literally. And Annabeth asks if Hephaestus told him the answer, and Percy says that he basically told him the same kind of deal that Hera told him that he already knew, but now this time Percy actually gets it because Hephaestus did more than just say, you know it. I get that it had to make sense for the plot and all of that, but Hera really low on my list of favorite gods and goddesses because she was so entirely unhelpful.
The answer was inside you the whole time.
Just, not good. And then with what Hephaestus reveals about Hera, just not a fan of hers. No. I don't know how I'm going to feel when she's introduced in Hades 2, which she obviously will be because she wasn't in Hades 1 in a major way. So I don't know. If she's nice in Hades 2, I'm going to feel conflicted. But I feel like, given the circumstances of the plot, she would be maybe not. I really have no idea how the game is going to work.
Given my knowledge of Greek mythology in general, actually, I'm still not going to answer this question. What am I doing?
Good,
trapdoor
great,
intact.
Trapdoor intact. Yes, that was part of the home setup. While you were on your way over, I made sure to install a trapdoor really quickly in the place I'm staying. Narrator Percy then simply says, I told them my idea. So I wrote in my notes, all caps, is it Rachel Elizabeth Dare or not? Come on. You're very much intentionally burying the lead, Uncle Rick. I know your Uncle Tricks. Annabeth is not on board with the plan, meaning that it is 1,000% Rachel Elizabeth Dare. She would not be against a Clarice-led journey or someone else. The only person she'd really be upset about is Rachel Elizabeth Dare. Chiron's intrigued, though, saying, quote, there is precedent, however. Theseus had the help of Ariadne. Harriet Tubman, daughter of Hermes, used many mortals on her underground railroad for just this reason. I'm very excited. I want to know more about this. And I want to write this Rick Riordan Presents book of Harriet Tubman, daughter of Hermes.
I love the idea of this headcanon of Rick's that the Underground Railroad was actually underground.
That would be a fun way to prove how bad the history book system in the US is just poll people, Billy on the Street style or whatever. Just poll Americans and see what percentage think that the Underground Railroad was literally underground. I would guess 65% say yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I had an excellent U.S. history teacher, I must say.
I had a very good AP U.S. history teacher,
yes.
But that was about it. And I don't even blame my teachers. I blame the textbooks. Like, they just yada yada over all the bad stuff. And it's only getting worse when you have people like DeSantis being like, oh, any textbook is no book. He literally, it's no book. Anyway, we got to keep going. No books, no book. Get the fuck out.
I know. It's such a sanctimonious thing to say here, surrounded by all these books.
There's books? Ugh. Annabeth is upset, saying that it's her quest, so she needs to lead it. Chiron uncomfortably agrees that it is her quest, but he also notes that she needs help. Annabeth is not convinced that this will help. She pleads for a different solution because this is wrong and it's cowardly. Percy agrees that it's hard to admit that they need a mortal's help, but he thinks that it's necessary. Annabeth says, quote, you are the single most annoying, all in italics, person I have ever met. And storms off, and she doesn't mean that. She just loves him so much. She's just jealous of Rachel Elizabeth Dare, and also a little grumpy about not being able to lead the quest, and also she loves Percy.
Percy can still be annoying, though.
That is very true. That is very true. Look, I can even be annoying. I'm well aware of my annoyingness to Kelly. You can love someone and still admit that they are annoying. I'm annoying sometimes. I get it. I totally get it. Percy is so angry that he wants to hit something, and then he says, so much for being the bravest friend she's ever had, which is a great, great grumble moment.
Such a 14-year-old, too.
Such a 14-year-old. Chiron says that she'll be fine. She's just jealous, which she definitely is, and it's jealousy on multiple fronts. Chiron then insinuates that there's an additional front that I didn't even consider. He thinks that Annabeth might have a guess as to where Percy was marooned, which is a big uh-oh. Percy can tell that Chiron has definitely put it together, so maybe him withholding that information is going to bite him in the butt later because it's only going to make things worse, but we shall see. Chiron says, quote, "We won't dwell on your choices. You came back. That is what matters." And I'm confused here because why shouldn't we dwell on his choices? Because he chose to leave. So shouldn't we dwell in a good way about how Percy said, no, I'm going to leave paradise to be back with my friends in this terrible situation?
I think more than anything, Chiron's just trying to let him off the hook. It's clear that Percy doesn't want to talk about Calypso. He still feels really awful about it.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, Chiron's just kind of letting sleeping dogs lie.
Okay.
It's like, we won't dwell on your choices, even though I think Chiron agrees with you. Everyone's happy that he made the right choice to come back.
Right.
But at the same time, it's sort of like, clearly Percy wants to move on from this. And so let's just be kind and let him do that.
Yeah. Let's stay corrected. Chiron says that he'll have Argus bring him and Annabeth into Manhattan in the morning, and they'll make a stop by Sally's since she is, quote, understandably distraught, which I could not have said better myself. Percy then has an, oh crap, right, my mom moment, and he feels really bad on it. And honestly, I think he's being a little hard on himself because you've gone through a lot. How can you process everything? And we all have those moments where we're worried about so many things / people that sometimes you're going to forget about someone else that's also affected by it. So I don't think he needs to feel terrible. I can totally understand making a goof and then not factoring in someone as important as your mom into a circumstance.
Yeah, he did almost die.
Right. Like, you're allowed to forget some stuff, Percy. Yeah. You have just a few things going on. Percy asks Chiron about Grover and Tyson. He says he doesn't know. He goes on to say that Juniper is so distressed that her branches are turning yellow. Or is it because she's a traitor? And the guilt is making her leaves turn yellow. I'm not convinced she's innocent.
Who's to say?
Who is to say? But I am feeling a little less confident about my thought of Juniper. But as the chapter goes on, I feel reassured because the quintus of it just feels too easy. Now, it could be a third person, and I could be very silly here. But I'm not feeling like it's Quintus. Let's continue, and it'll make sense. Now, Chiron also notes that the council revoked Grover's license in absentia, and they will exile him if he does return alive. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, sure. But if he returns alive with Pan, he'll be totally fine. No big deal.
These cranky old goats. I don't like them.
Grumpy goats. Ugh, those goats are definitely the satyrs that show up in Hades the video game. The bad satyrs.
Satyrs are villains in Hades the video game for anyone that has not played. If you're interested in checking out the game, you should.
No, not until they pay me. I've emailed Supergiant Games and I said, hey, let's do a partnership. They've not replied to my email. So it's a really good game. But no explicit promotion until they pay me, just highly implied promotion. Anyway, you should watch our streams.
I love Hades so much.
They are not listening. Instead of buying the game, you should watch the patron streams that Stephen and I have done. So far, it's 6 hours of joy, and you support a good cause. The Patreon, which allows me to do this as a full-time job. Anyway, Percy Jackson. Chiron thinks that there is hope for them. Percy regrets leaving them behind, but Chiron says that Grover had to choose his destiny, and Tyson is very brave for following him. He brings up the empathy link as a way that Percy would know whether or not Grover is okay, and he then mentions that he has 2 unpleasant things to tell Percy, to which Percy replies, great. First bit of bad news, Chris Rodriguez, who I always love the fact that he is on a first name, last name basis, establishing himself like you, who's always Stephen Parra, and Michael Hollis, our previous guest, who's always Michael Hollis.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just become first name, last name people. I was Mike Schubert to a lot of people, full name, full stop in middle school, so I totally get it. So Chris is getting worse, unfortunately. He's too weak to move, he won't eat or drink, and he's lost the will to live. And Clarice was at his bedside constantly, but Chiron had to order her to resume her regular schedule because it was just becoming too much. And I feel so bad for Clarice. I feel bad for Chris, obviously, and it's just a really tough situation. And I'm sure it's something that a lot of folks can relate to, whether you've got someone slowly passing that is a loved one for you. And it's kind of sometimes when people are on their last legs, it does have a 2 week not eating, and it's tough. Even though you can anticipate it coming, it doesn't make it any easier.
No, certainly not. I've dealt with that in my personal life, and then I've worked in the ICU many times.
Right, yeah.
In the hospital. Oh, by the way.
Yeah, let's get that one out.
My name is Stephen Parra. All the jokes, opinions, and statements I make in this podcast are mine and mine alone. they don't reflect the opinions, thoughts, wishes, or prayers of any medical school or medical institution that exists.
I can't wait to turn that into a merch sticker. A hello, my name is thing with all of that written on
I
it.
need to standardize this more, or just make it even more ornate and ridiculous for the merch. I don't know.
Yeah, if we do it like a live show exclusive thing, it could be about live shows. We've got
We'll
lots
figure
of
it
options.
out.
We'll figure it out. Percy's heart goes out to Clarice as well, even despite their history. And now, having seen what Minos is like, Percy can totally see how Chris could have been driven mad by him in the Labyrinth. Percy thinks that if he was in there alone, he wouldn't have made it out alive, or at least in a normal state.
Yeah, and I think what's so tough about Chris's whole story in
Chris Rodriguez's whole story.
about Chris Rodriguez's whole story in this situation is that, like, I think he's one of the most palpable, like, examples of the consequences of this war between the gods and the Titans. Obviously, these creator celestial beings are, having quarrels with each other, but the people that are getting caught in the crossfire are the demigods. And, even though Chris Rodriguez was on the other side, he's bearing the brunt and the consequences of this overall conflict that really is coming about because the gods are kind of jerks.
Yeah, it's very much a Titans versus the gods. Who loses? Everybody else. It's like the poster for Alien versus Predator.
No matter who wins.
Whoever wins, we lose. It's basically what it is. I guess if the gods win, the humans are going to be okay, but it's more of the fight is going on, just like you're saying. The demigods and humanity is definitely taking the brunt of it. Look at just what happened to the residents of Washington State.
Yeah.
A bunch of them just got displaced, and it's a scary situation to which the only concern of Hephaestus is, oh, I hope my forge is okay. I'm like, gosh, completely different stakes. Chiron then moves on to bad news number 2, which he says is worse. Great. He says that Quintus is missing. Percy asks how that is possible, and Chiron says that Juniper saw him slip into the labyrinth 3 days ago. And I wrote, Juniper, eh? Sure. If it was literally anyone else that saw him go into the labyrinth, I would have thought, all right, he's bad. Dang it. But because it was Juniper, I'm not convinced. And there's something that happens later that I feel is even less convincing and more question/eyebrow raising. Percy is convinced that Quintus is a spy for Luke. He cites the scorpions coming from Triple G Ranch as proof. And that is, unfortunately, very good evidence. But I still want to stay in on him not being the bad guy. Chiron sighs, lamenting that Quintus did not prove to be a friend, and he regrets his poor judgment. But I don't know, man. Maybe don't count your chickens before they hatch. Because it just feels like too early of a reveal. We're on chapter 13. There's a lot of book left for there still to be the twist/reveal of who the spies are. And it did say spies plural. And unless they're calling Mrs. O'Leary a spy, I feel like Juniper and the nymphs makes more sense in a plural spies situation.
Dude, Mrs. O'Leary would be a great spy. Her ears are so big.
The ears, the nose.
People trust her because she's a big dog.
She's a hellhound. She's huge. I mean, that's such a large spy. You think of spies as being smaller and more nimble, but, wouldn't suspect her off the bat, given the size, maybe making her a perfect spy.
Exactly.
And it all makes sense. Percy asks about Mrs. O'Leary. Chiron says that she is still in the arena and won't let anyone approach. Chiron says that he didn't have the heart to put her in a cage or destroy her. And I thought, oh, right, that's a thing that you would have had to consider. Yikes. Percy thinks that it's mad fishy. Quintus wouldn't just leave her behind. And I think that's true. That feels really strange. Feels like something's up there. Chiron also is being a little suspicious because he's very much trying to brush this aside where he goes, as I said, Percy, we seem to have been wrong about him. Now you should prepare yourself for the morning. You and Annabeth still have much to do. I don't know if this is Chiron knowing or if it's just because there is much to do.
This is plot Chiron, I think.
This could be plot Chiron.
Come on, Skippy. Gotta move it along. We're only chapter 13 here.
Percy leaves, and Chiron just sadly looks into the fireplace, making Percy wonder how many times Chiron has had to wait for heroes who never returned. That's a big woof moment for sure.
Oh, yeah, that line devastated me when I reread it today. I was just like, oh.
It's just really tough being immortal. There's just lots of sad things that happen in your life. And it's always easier to remember the sad stuff than the happy stuff. Just like how it's so much easier for me to remember the 1-star reviews instead of the 5-star reviews. Now, before dinner, Percy swings by the sword arena and he sees Mrs. O'Leary. When she catches eyes with him, she barks and rushes towards him. She starts to lick him, and he gets wet despite his Poseidon powers, meaning that dog licking is more powerful than the ocean. Percy asks where Quintus is and how he could have just left her. She whimpers in apparent agreement. Percy feels ready to believe that Quintus is a villain, but he is not ready to believe that he would just leave Mrs. O'Leary behind. All right, he's on the same wavelength as me here. Clarisse then approaches and says that Percy is lucky that Mrs. O'Leary didn't rip his head off. She explains that she came here yesterday to practice and the dog tried to chew her up. Percy replies, she's an intelligent dog. And Clarisse snaps back with, funny. Mrs. O'Leary comes closer and growls, but Percy pats her head to calm her down. He tells Clarisse that he heard about Chris Rodriguez and he's sorry. She absolutely torches a training dummy out of anger, and then in a shaky voice goes on about how stuff like this just happens to heroes. They die, but monsters keep coming back. And she then chucks a javelin across the arena and hits a dummy right between the eyes. And narrator Percy picks up on how she called Chris Rodriguez a hero as if the traitor stuff never happened, reminding him of the way that Annabeth talks about Luke sometimes. And he decides, I'm just not going to say this out loud, which I think was a smart decision.
Yeah. And, I think it comes back to like what I was saying earlier, where it's, all these demigods are kind of caught in the middle here. And as you've talked about before with Luke, like there's legitimate reasons for people to want to come to his side. Like he has a good point. He's just going about it in a very destructive way.
Right. And I feel like Chris Rodriguez is more believable and more sympathetic as a got swept up in things as opposed to Luke, because Chris got swept up by Luke's reasoning, which isn't bad, and then very quickly had a situation that turned really sour on him. Whereas Luke has seen this from the beginning and saw it before it really picked up a lot of steam and just feels like he's in over his head. He's had many chances to get out of this, or at least he's seen a lot of different ways that this is bad, and time again just doubles down, triples down, quadruples down. I feel less sympathetic for Luke, especially towards his eventual, no, I regret my decision thing that's coming in book 5 that I just know, and I just need to keep talking about it so I don't get too mad at Rick Riordan, because I think he's a very good writer.
I'm going to hold all comments.
Trapdoor intact. Percy calls Chris Rodriguez brave, says he hopes he gets better, and Clarisse glares at him and then asks Percy for a favor. If you find Daedalus, don't trust him. Don't ask him for help, just kill him, which is very intense. And Percy tries to interject, but she keeps on going, saying that anyone who could have made something as evil as the Labyrinth is pure evil as well. Narrator Percy then says, quote, for a second she reminded me of Eurydion, the cowherd, her much older half-brother. She had the same hard look in her eyes as if she'd been used for the past 2,000 years and was getting tired of it. She sheathed her sword and says, practice time is over. From now on, it's for real, which is a very Ares type line.
I just really love this scene with Clarisse, to be honest with you. We get to see her be more vulnerable and grow. I mean, it's like, just thinking back to the character that ambushed Percy in the bathroom in the first book and see where we are now with her relationship with Percy and like how she's grown in our eyes, like reading about her as a character. It's cool to just see there's a lot more to Clarisse than we first thought.
Right. I think Clarisse's arc, which I'm assuming will end as friend, going from bully to complex to friend, I think it's really nice. It's a very captivating and compelling arc so far. It's also, I think, a good thing to teach kids. You could have any character go through a tough time, but to have the character that was established as the bully that we don't like be the character that we slowly fall in love with, it's great. You saw a shorter version of this with Zoe. Now we see a more drawn out version of it with Clarisse. And I think it's just a great way to teach kids lessons in a way that doesn't feel like you're reading a PSA. No character says, now, Percy, you should feel bad for Clarisse, even though she was mean to you and tried to give you a swirly that one time. I think it's great. It's really good stuff. It's like tricking a kid into eating vegetables or tricking your dog to eat medicine by putting it inside the food. Rick's so good at this.
I know.
So Percy goes to sleep in his own bunk for the first time in quite some time, and it's dream time. Before we get into dream time, let's take a break for the Admiral of the Labyrinth, where I believe you and I will be in Europe by the time this episode is going live. So you can potentially see me and Stephen Parra live in Europe if you want to go see a live show, as long as everything works out with your passport fun time situation.
Yes.
I'm definitely going to be there because I have this week paid lots of deposits and bank transfers in various currencies. So I'm certainly going to be there. And I hope Stephen will be there too.
Fingers crossed.
But you can listen to all sorts of fun updates and things like that, such as the Hades stream that we talked about. And Stephen told me off mic was what he was going to hype up anyway, not the game. So I'm a big fool for interjecting there. Maybe I should just let people finish before I assume what they're going to say. Anyway, let's get into the Admiral of the Labyrinth, and then we'll continue the rest of this episode. Hello and welcome to the Admiral of the Labyrinth Dublin edition. That's right, I'm in Ireland. I've got the live show tomorrow on March 7th, if you're listening to this when the episode comes out on March 6th. And there's also tickets for all of the shows, or at least the shows that aren't sold out. I'm really sorry that I couldn't get some bigger venues. I'm trying to add extra shows. But if you go to thenewsolympian.com/live, you can see where we're going. You can get tickets. And if you follow us on social media, you'll see updates about me trying to add more shows to some of the cities where we already sold out. Thank you for giving me this wonderful problem of trying to get extra shows. It truly is a great problem to have, but I really want to make sure that everyone who wants to see a show can see a show. So I'm doing my best. Now let's talk about some other updates beyond the Europe tour, because maybe you can't go to the show for whatever reason. You don't live close, doesn't work in your schedule, whatever. If you're still looking for some extra TNO content, as I mentioned, social media is a great place. We are on Twitter and Instagram at Newest Olympian. There's a subreddit, reddit.com/r/thenewestolympian. And I'm going to be posting stuff throughout there, as I always am, but especially while I'm traveling and all, pigeons from across the world, all sorts of fun updates. And if you crave even more content, you can go to the Patreon, which is at thenewsolympian.com/Patreon, where you can get bonus episodes and audio that gets cut from the episodes, and sometimes the clips that Sherry puts in when she sends me the edits. And there are monthly Q&A live streams, and there's the Hades stream that Stephen and I talk about in this episode. Lots of fun stuff, all at thenewsolympian.com/Patreon. And I want to thank the folks who have joined the Patreon most recently. So shout out to our newest Ultra God tier patron, Luna Kadoon. Shout out to our newest Super God tier patron, Matilde Jewel Tharup. Shout out to our newest God tier patrons, Lami Kim, Audrito Dorito, Rona G, and Selena Farrell. And shout out to our newest demigod tier patrons, I, Joanna, and Emma Galante. Now, if I've mispronounced any of your names, or if I give you a shout out at any point in the past and I mispronounce your name, please send me a message on Patreon and I will do a name correction. Same thing for if I somehow missed your shout out. I want to make sure that you get it. You've paid for a shout out in addition to some of the other bonuses and perks. So I want to make sure you get what you pay for. But thank you all so much for your support. May Kronos, the Lord of Time, bless you with the ability to navigate changing time zones, as I have been dealing with for the past couple of weeks, and to varying success. So hopefully he can help you out, even though he's a big old evil titan. Maybe he can throw you a bone. Now, if you're all caught up in the Newest Olympian and you're looking for a new podcast to listen to, I make a bunch of podcasts, and I'm an independent podcast boy doing my best, and I think the shows that I make are very good, and I think that you will enjoy them. One that you would really enjoy is Modern Muckraker, especially if you enjoyed all of the New York talk that Stephen and I did in this episode, because Modern Muckraker is an investigative journalism podcast that is comedic. I play the role of a journalist who believes he is solving the world's most important queries out there, but really the questions that we answer are things such as, when should Spider-Man take the subway instead of web swinging? So that is a very New York-centric episode. We talk to folks from Marvel. We do research on the NYC transit system. We utilized a database that had the building heights of every building in the entirety of Manhattan. Lots of intense stuff went into it, and it's a super fun, good time. And you can listen to that by searching for Modern Muckraker wherever you get your podcasts, or going to modernmuck.com. Now, before we wrap up here, you're going to hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to be a full-time podcaster. Some of these ads will be read by me. Others of them won't. The ones that are not read by me are inserted locally. So if you live in Dublin, don't be surprised if you hear an ad for Guinness, because my, oh my, have I seen a whole bunch of Guinness billboards in the 1/2 of a day that I have been here. But once those ads are complete, we'll get back to this episode of The Newest Olympian. And we're back, and it's time for some very cool, fun, happy dreams, as they always are. Percy's first dream. Oh, yep, there's going to be more than one. He's in a king's courtroom with white marble columns and a wooden throne. Feels like a throne made of wood? Come on. What? How do you have white marble columns and not a throne made out of anything more ornate? Unless it has cool carvings and stuff in it. Then I can get it. Feels like you should have a fancier throne, though. You're a king. Come on.
Could just be fiscally irresponsible.
We'll see. They could be starving for some cash. Atop the throne sits a man with curly red hair, and at his side are 3 girls that appear to be his daughters because they've got similar hair and similar looks. A herald alerts him that King Minos is entering, and narrator Percy calls Minos, quote, the royal creep himself. And Percy notices that Minos is much taller and much more serious than the other king when he enters. And Minos also looks older compared to the last time Percy saw him in a dream. Minos says, King Cocalus? Is that really how we're pronounced? Is it Cocalus?
I mean, that's... Don't look at me.
Right.
I'm not Greek. Text your pronunciation corrections to Brandon Grugel at Twitter.
Now you have to text him because not only did he delete his Instagram, he deleted his Twitter too.
Oh.
So go to brandongrugel.com and then he doesn't have a contact? Brandon. Oh, he does have Meddling Adults and Potterless listed as appearances on podcasts. Thank you.
Brandon, if you're listening to this, can you please read Percy Jackson?
Now you can go to the free music mixing portion of his website. He does listen email you can contact him at. So if you want to go that route and you want to send the correct pronunciation for Cocalus, do it there. So many hoops.
No, it's a good bit. We got to keep it.
It's a good bit. We're committed to the bit. Brandon will respect it if he does get an email, and I'll tell him the whole process. Anyway, Minos says, King Cocalus, I understand that you have solved my little riddle. And Cocalus scoffs at the notion of it being little because Minos put the word out that he would pay 1,000 gold talents to anyone who could solve it. And he asks Minos if the offer is genuine. Minos proves it is by having his guards present a crate full of gold bars, and narrator Percy very helpfully letting the reader understand what the conversion rate is for gold talents says, quote, it had to be worth like $1 gazillion.
Yeah, it sounds about right to me.
Sounds about right, yeah. It checks out for sure.
Actually, hey Siri, how much is a talent?
It is funny, and I'm going to definitely have to do this throughout Europe, all the different countries. I did this in Australia and New Zealand. Very common just Googling blah, 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 USD to AUD, blah, 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 NZD to USD. Very common thing I've got to do. Cocalus thinks that Minos must have bankrupted his kingdom in order to attain this amount of money. Minos says that it's not his concern, which means he 1,000% did. Cocalus says the riddle was simple and that one of his retainers solved it. The oldest daughter warns him to not say anything, but he continues, taking out a spiral-shaped seashell from his robes with a string through it like a beaded necklace. Minos asks how the retainer threaded it without breaking the shell. Cocalus responds that he tied a silk string to an ant and coaxed it through the other end of the shell with honey. And honestly, pretty smart plan. Really ingenious.
But if you're dexterous enough to tie a thread around an ant, couldn't you just stick it through the hole in the shell and tie it?
Yeah. The only thing I'm thinking, because they said it was a spiral-shaped shell, is that they just don't have the right string where no matter what, there's a certain point where it's not gonna
because it's gonna swirl.
Right. It's gonna keep going. So I think it's harder than just threading a needle. I think it's literally just the geometry of the shell would not allow for the right string to go through. But I agree with you. It's really tough to tie some silk string around an ant, but I guess that's Daedalus, baby.
I mean, it makes you wonder how many ants he went through before he got one.
Oh, no. I hope no ants were harmed in the solving of this riddle. Minos calls this solution ingenious. Cocalus agrees and says that this retainer is the tutor of his daughters, who are quite fond of him, causing Minos' eyes to turn cold, and it makes him warn Cocalus to be careful of that. Percy wants to yell out to Cocalus not to trust this guy, and Percy turns out to be very correct. Cocalus asks about the gold. Minos says that the gold is for the solver of the riddle, and there can only be one such man to solve the riddle, Daedalus. Cocalus is shocked when Minos knows his name. Minos reveals that Daedalus worked in his court and turned his own daughter against him. He calls him a thief and a usurper, and he says that he's been searching for him for 10 years because Daedalus has escaped justice. Cocalus says that he knew nothing of this, but he doesn't want to give up Daedalus because he offered to protect him, and Daedalus has proven to be very helpful in the kingdom. Minos then gives Cocalus a choice. Either turn over Daedalus or risk Minos and all of Crete becoming the enemy of Cocalus and his kingdom, which I can only assume is Cocalania? They never say what place this guy's from. Cockadoodle-doo?
Sorry, I couldn't think of one.
I could hear
Cockroach?
you triumph. Cocalovia? Percy is surprised at how scared Cocalus looks, wondering why he doesn't just call in a whole bunch of guards to bring Minos and his guards away. He's only got 2 guards, feels like he should be outnumbered. Cocalus' oldest daughter, Aelia, here's a just question. When do you use oldest and when do you use eldest? Or is it completely interchangeable and is it just vibes?
I think it's just vibes.
Just
I don't think they would
vibes.
mean anything different.
Eldest just feels too fancy to be like his eldest daughter, Aelia.
Well, they are royalty, but they have
true.
a wooden throne.
Oh, not great enough royalty.
Yes.
His eldest daughter, Aelia, is upset that he's even considering the choice. She does not want Cocalus to give up Daedalus. Cocalus silences her and tells Minos the gods don't love someone who breaks an oath of hospitality, but Minos replies that they also don't love someone who harbors criminals. And I'm thinking, all right, like criminal, I don't know if he really has a crime. He just escaped captivity from an unjust king? I mean, they haven't actually revealed exactly how he turned Minos' daughter against him, right? I don't think they've said the specifics, or if they did, I'm forgetting them.
What I'll say is I think Minos is exactly what's on the tin.
Okay.
And he's going to wrap his life's events however he wants to frame it.
Big fan of revisionist history.
Yeah. I would say he's a classic Narcissus, but that's a different Greek character.
Very good joke. Cocalus nods and says that Minos can have Daedalus, much to the dismay of Aelia. But then she quickly switches her tone and instead offers that she should at least be able to give Minos a feast before he departs. It was such a long journey, and she wants to treat him to a hot bath, new clothes, and a good meal. She offers to draw the bath herself and then make some eyes at Minos. And I just wrote here, she's going to kill this guy. This had Chicago written all over it.
Michael, you got to finish the dream.
Sorry. No spoilers. Look, all I said was, this is what I wrote in my notes.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
I haven't
Sorry.
given away the ending quite yet. I'm just very good at guessing very obvious things sometimes. Now, Minos agrees because all of his blood rushed out of his brain, and I'll just leave it at that because it's a All Ages podcast. Aelia leads him to a bath chamber with fanciness all around. There's mosaics, etc. The sisters come along with her, and they set up a very fancy bath. And they have rose petals and things that are basically the Greek version of what Percy says is Mr. Bubble. I don't know if that's actually a brand of bubble bath. But he enters the chamber, he enters the bath, the girls all look away while he derobes, and then Aelia turns back and says he must be a very determined person if he's been chasing Daedalus for 10 years. Minos says that he never forgets a debt and that Cocalus was wise to accept his terms. Aelia agrees, in quotation marks, which makes Percy think that she's laying on the flattery a bit too hard, but then he also realizes that Minos is absolutely eating it up, so it's working, so it's fine. Aelia tells Minos that Daedalus thought that he would come and thought that the riddle was a trap, but he just couldn't resist solving it. Minos is surprised that Daedalus spoke of him, and he warns the sisters not to fall under his spell. Aelia calls Daedalus a genius who believes that women can be just as smart as men, which gotta give some credit to Daedalus, good thing, especially back in these years. She says that he taught them that they had minds of their own, and perhaps that's what Daedalus did to Minos' daughter as well. So I'm excited to learn exactly what happened either later in the book or in the Dr. Moya episode. Minos tries to sit up, but the sisters push him back into the water as Aelia drops in 3 bronze beads that wrap up the king by the ankles, the wrists, and the neck. Percy says that it's a tough scene to watch even though he hates Minos, and yeah, the description of this was pretty intense.
Pretty brutal, man, honestly.
Yeah. And even more brutal, his head is just above the water level, and he asks the girls what they want and why they're doing this. Aelia says Daedalus has been kind to them, and she doesn't like Minos threatening her father. Minos then immediately goes to, "You tell Daedalus, you tell him I will hound him even after death. If there is any justice in the underworld, my soul will haunt him for eternity." And now I just wrote, his motive. What I did find strange here is that he immediately just went to, yeah, they're going to kill me, and I'm just going to go with getting off a line before I die. I was surprised that there was no pleading for his life, making some sort of offerings to them. Feels like Minos is the type to grovel at least a little bit, maybe.
I think maybe he's just too proud. I think he's just like, I'm going to go out on my terms then. Sort of thing.
Definitely my terms, as I am wrapped up in 3 different places and I'm super gonna die.
But if he tells you the story.
That's very true. That's very, very true. Aelia says, brave words, your majesty. I wish you luck finding your justice in the underworld. And the narrator Percy says, and with that, the bronze threads wrapped around Minos' face, making him a bronze mummy. Super intense. Not what I thought was going to happen. I thought they were just going to move him down under the water or strangle him a little bit more. But yeah, bronze mummy. Daedalus then enters with a traveler's bag and a new, shorter haircut. He is looking older as well as compared to the last time Percy saw him. He touches the mummy and it's empty. Daedalus calls this a painless death, and he says that's better than what Minos deserved. He thanks the princesses. Aelia hugs him and says that he cannot stay because Cocalus will be furious when he sees what they did. Daedalus agrees and apologizes for causing them trouble. Aelia says it won't be too big of a deal because 1, Cocalus is going to get the gold, and 2, Crete is very far away. But she does say that he will pin the death on Daedalus, so he's got to get out of here. Daedalus says he's been fleeing from kingdom to kingdom for years trying to avoid Minos, and he believes what Minos said to be true. Death won't stop Minos from hounding him. He says that he will go, but he adds that he doesn't think any place is going to accept him once word of this crime gets out. Aelia asks where he will go then, and Daedalus says, quote, a place I swore never to enter again. My prison may be my only sanctuary. Very intense. Aelia doesn't understand. Guess she's not actually that smart. Daedalus says that it's best that she doesn't. And then one of the sisters asks what about his fate in the underworld, for everyone must die at some point. Daedalus says perhaps, but then he grabs Perdix's scroll and says, or perhaps not. Ooh, very action scene-y with all of the one-liners in this dream. He pats Aelia's shoulder, blesses her and her sisters. He turns to the empty bath and says, find me if you dare, king of the ghosts. Again, this is just, when did this book become an 80s movie? He touches a tile and a theta appears. Aelia says Daedalus never spoke of secret passages and that he must have been busy, but Daedalus corrects her and says that the Labyrinth has been busy and warns them not to follow him if they in fact value their sanity. We get a dream shift. We're in an underground stone chamber where Luke and another half-blood are studying a map. Luke curses, and I like that it's kind of established here that cursing is bad, because Luke is doing a lot of cursing here. So I feel like this is another one of those subtle ways to be like, the villain is the one that curses. You shouldn't curse, kids, / 30-year-old Mike Schubert, who did smartly decide to make this an all-ages appropriate podcast. Luke curses and says that it should have been the last turn before crumpling and tossing aside the map. Obviously, they are in the maze. Luke's lackey thinks that they shouldn't ditch the map, but Luke says that maps are useless here. He also reveals that the larger the group, the more likely they are to get lost, which is why they started sending solo explorers through at the beginning. He says they just need the string, and then they can lead the vanguard through the labyrinth. The lackey asks how they will get the thread. Luke says that Quintus will come through, saying all they have to do is reach the arena and it will be at the juncture. So 1, the arena has been mentioned before, so it feels like some sort of showdown will go down at the arena, which makes sense. It's an arena. But 2, it's making it really tough for me to think that Quintus isn't guilty, but I just can't get there. I feel like it could be a thing where his cover is so good that he has to keep it under wraps, and he's done so enough to fool Luke, maybe even Chiron, or maybe Chiron knows and he doesn't want Percy to accidentally spill the beans, so he didn't say anything to him. Something inside me thinks that it's not Quintus, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong before.
I mean, I've never read this book, so I don't know.
Then we got to stop this episode. What am I doing? The guests always have to read the book. Luke says that they need a truce with its master, so I'm assuming he means the strings master, so Ariadne, or someone else who now has possession of Ariadne's string. Is Ariadne dead? She's dead, right? She's dead. She was the mortal, right?
One would suspect.
Yeah, so.
As a mortal person.
Right. So maybe not Ariadne, maybe someone else is the owner of it. Ooh, I might have a guess.
What is your guess?
Well, I haven't read chapter 14, but I've read the chapter title for 14. So without spoiling anything, I will just say I think it might be the same person that I think is on the other end of the chapter 14 title.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on that episode.
No, someone else is. So they just got to make a truce with the master, get the string, and then Luke starts to say they just need to stay alive until, but then a new voice says that the Dracani have found a half-blood. Luke asks if they were alone. The voice confirms. Luke asks who it is, and they say they've never seen him before, but he's cornered. And I just wrote, oh no, not Nico. We'll just have to see who the reveal is. Luke excitedly runs down the corridor, and Percy wakes up. Next morning, Percy ensures that Mrs. O'Leary has had enough dog biscuits, and he asks Beckendorf to keep an eye on her. He doesn't seem keen on that, and I get it, because Percy basically walked up to him and said, hey, here's some extra responsibility of walking this giant monster dog. All right, bye, Beckendorf. I wouldn't want to do that. What if Beckendorf's not a dog person?
I don't know, but he'd probably make a pretty sick leash.
Oh, that's true. He could make some cool toys, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on, Beckendorf. You're the perfect guy for the job.
Exactly.
Narrator Percy then says, Annabeth and I didn't talk much in the van because they are now in the van with Argus. Argus never spoke, probably because he had eyes all over his body, including, so I'd heard, at the tip of his tongue, and he didn't like to show that off. Very intriguing. Eyeball and a tongue? Don't want to think about it too much. Annabeth looks like she had a rough night of sleep, so Percy, to break the silence, asks if she had bad dreams. She says no. It was an IM from Eurydion who told her that Nico left the ranch last night to enter the maze, and damn it, I hate that I was right. I don't like being right about the bad stuff. Eurydion thought he was hearing Nico talking to himself at night, but now he fears that he was talking to Minos. And I'm pretty mad at Eurydion for not checking in on Nico. How do you not just pull a mom, oh, sorry, like you should open the door and see what's up?
I mean, he's a ranch hand, not a therapist.
That's true. He's a ranch hand, not a parent.
He's a son of Ares. Come on, man.
That's true. That's very true. As a son of Ares, though, what if he got a deck of cards, asked Nico to play a game of war with him, and then lead into some conversation about who he's talking to that night? You know, maybe that could be his.
Could be. Do you think Eurydion would take losing well?
Yeah, you're right. Percy says that Nico is in danger. Annabeth thinks that he just means the Minos situation, but Percy relays what he dreamt last night, so Annabeth now is concerned as well. Percy asks what they should do. Annabeth raises an eyebrow and says, well, it's a good thing you have a plan to guide us, huh? It's a great zing. Sassy Annabeth in this chapter is top-notch stuff. She is great.
Oh, yeah. She comes with her claws out. It's
so
great.
Good. It's so good. They arrive at Sally's, and she hugs Percy so fiercely that it only rivals the big pounce he got from Mrs. O'Leary. We now get this from the book. I told them you were all right, my mom said, but she sounded like the weight of the sky had just been lifted off her shoulders, and believe me, I know firsthand how that feels. Great callback. Great callback. She gives them blue chocolate chip cookies, of course, and she asks for a recap of what has happened. Percy gives her the recap. He tries to water down the scary parts, but as narrator Percy, he notes that's basically everything, so it doesn't really work. Sally pulls a classic mom move after the stables part, saying to Annabeth, I can't get him to clean his room, but he'll clean a bunch of horse manure. Oh, so good. Annabeth laughs, and Percy loves to hear that because he hasn't heard her laugh in quite some time.
No.
So sweet.
It's very sweet.
Adorable. Sally says, so you wrecked Alcatraz Island, made Mount St. Helens explode, and displaced 500,000 people, but at least you're safe. And narrator Percy says, that's my mom, always looking on the bright side. Sally wishes that Paul was here, and I'm still thinking, I don't know if I can trust Paul, because he wanted to talk to Percy. Percy is reminded of the school, basically doing a, oh yeah, right, that happened in this book, and asks Sally what she told Paul. All she says is, what could I say? And then goes on about how Paul knows Percy is different, but he's not sure exactly how, but he still thinks Percy's a good guy. He needs to convince the school that the fire wasn't Percy's fault, but that's a tough task since Percy was seen fleeing the scene. And I do feel a little bit better about Paul here. I'm starting to feel less like he is an evil villain of sorts. Maybe he's just bad at his job and couldn't tell that Tammy and Kelly were evil Greek monsters and not simply cheerleaders.
Could be.
I have tasked you with a tough chapter here,
I know.
haven't I? I did not mean to do this to you, but I have done it to you. Annabeth looks at Percy sympathetically. Percy promises to talk to Paul after the quest, and he says that he'd even tell him the truth if Sally wanted. And we get this exchange. You would do that? Well, yeah, I mean, he'd think we're crazy. He already thinks that. Then there's nothing to lose.
I love that exchange so much.
Really fun, really fun. Maybe say wild instead of crazy, but
yes,
than
of
that,
course, yes.
mid-2000s book. She thanks Percy and then asks him what happens next after trying to decide when she would tell Paul the timeline of when she could say that Percy would talk to him. She basically has to stop herself short and goes, what are the next steps? Annabeth breaks her cookie in half and says, Percy has this plan, with plan in italics. It's so good. I feel like it needed mega italics. Could it be bold italics or underlined italics? It needed more than just italics for plan, because I could just hear her saying plan and throwing her hand off to the side.
I'm the wise girl, but he has the plan. Ugh.
Narrator Percy then says, reluctantly, I told my mom. And that's all he said. So Rick is really bearing the lead here, so much so that I think Chiron has gotten to Rick Riordan. He is really making sure that the plot stays reveal-y. Sally says that it's dangerous, but it might work. Percy asks if she has the same powers, making it very clear it's Rachel Elizabeth Dare. Sally says not so much now, but for sure when she was younger, it was one of the things that drew Poseidon to her. She wants the kids to promise her they'll be safe. Annabeth says that they'll try, but keeping Percy safe is a tough task, and then crosses her arm and stares out the window. Sally asks what's going on between the two of them. She asks if they've been fighting, and neither of them say anything, which is rough. Then we get this from the book. I see, my mom said, and I wondered if she could see through more than just the mist. It sounded like she understood what was going on with Annabeth and me, but I sure as heck didn't. Well, remember, she said, Grover and Tyson are counting on you too. And then Annabeth and Percy say, I know, in unison, and that embarrasses Percy mightily. Sally encourages Percy to use the phone. He does, and narrator Percy then says, the number washed off my hand a long time ago, but that was okay. Without meaning to, I'd memorized it. So, 1, whoa, but 2, Rachel Elizabeth Dare confirmation. Hey. Yeah.
Say that again. He did what?
He memorized it?
He memorized her number?
Yes.
Percy memorized Rachel Elizabeth Dare's number?
Yes.
That's kind of neat.
Are you just saying a hubba hubba type moment, or just that he's good at memorization, or what are you insinuating? What are you
Much more hubba hubba.
Okay. I do also feel like I don't remember it because it was so long ago when I made this prediction, but I feel like I very early on just said some sort of prediction of Rachel Elizabeth Dare coming back, which I think was obvious. I don't know if I specifically thought it would be helping them through the labyrinth, but I definitely feel like I guessed when they said, oh, mortals wander into the labyrinth all the time. No, I think that's what I guessed. I guessed that she would wander into the labyrinth, not that they would explicitly use her, yes, as part of the mission. So not correct for me. 0 points, no partial credit. You don't get partial credit for building half a bridge. One of my math teachers used to say that, which I thought was funny. Now, they plan to meet in Times Square. I'm shutting down the podcast. I can't read another page. What? Times Square? Percy, I thought you were a New Yorker. Ugh, gross. Gross. But what I then did realize when we see what happened is that Rachel Elizabeth Dare clearly told him, meet me in Times Square because of what's happening. Now, she's out in front of the Marriott Marquis. Any insight for your mom who works at Marriott, Stephen Parra? An accidental perfect guest for this chapter?
I've actually stayed at that hotel. It's very nice. It's smack in the middle of Times Square, so you are going to have the Times Square experience every time you go to your room.
I hate that.
For some people, that's what they're looking for when they come to New York City. I much prefer to stay places that are much more relaxed, but it's a big place. They got valet parking in the front, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing performance art in front of it, but hey, you're going to get a lot of foot traffic and a lot of tourists coming by, so maybe it's a great pick.
Yeah. Well, no, you're in Times Square. What do you get? Like, for what they're doing, I get it, but also I don't get it.
We're just going to be really New York for a little bit here. Sorry.
It's so bad. I can't unrecommend it enough. And I need to do it. And you know what? This is going to be my impetus for me actually doing this. If you go to my website, schub.es/NYCFAQ, you can find a website where I recommend all of the things that you should and shouldn't do in New York. Because very often, and I think it's very sweet, people will send me DMs on Twitter or Instagram asking, hey, I'm going to New York. I want to get a perspective of what I should do, where I should go, etc. And I'm very busy. I don't have the time to be everybody's travel agent. But if I set up this page, then I can just link that for people because I do get asked that quite a bit. If you go to that, you can see my recommendations of New York City. And now I will make sure by the time this episode goes live, if I'm double checking Sherry's edit and I still haven't done this, I will make the website. And I hope for future Mike's sake that some other future Mike did it. Anyway, Percy Jackson. So she's out in front of the Marriott and she is painted completely in gold with some other kids painted in other metallic shades. And there's a sign in front of them that says Urban Art for Kids, donations appreciated. Narrator Percy says, Annabeth and I stood there for like 5 minutes staring at Rachel, but if she noticed us, she didn't let on. She didn't move or even blink that I could see. So she's doing a very good job of one of those stationary statue type folks. Yeah. Definitely better than Creepy Elmo. So she wasn't being the worst version of someone in Times Square. Being ADHD and all, I could not have done that. Standing still that long would have driven me crazy. It was weird to see Rachel in gold too. She looked like a statue of somebody famous, an actress or something, only her eyes were normal green. And then Annabeth suggests, maybe if we push her over. Great. I love it. Ugh. Another kid comes up and stands next to Rachel Elizabeth Dare, and that allows her to break character and take a break. Clearly, they're doing some sort of shift system. She greets Percy and smiles, saying, great timing, let's get some coffee. And then they go to Java Moose on West 43rd Street. That's not real, right?
It is not real, but they're still in Times Square and go to a coffee shop in Times Square.
That sounds like a mess.
Yeah.
So she orders an espresso extreme. Also sounds like a mess. The other two get fruit smoothies. Smart decision. Narrator Percy says, nobody even looked twice at Rachel in her golden outfit. New York, baby!
Hey! Yeah, that reminds me so much of Into the Spider-Verse, where Miles Morales first meets Peter B. Parker, and they're both just kind of collapsed in the crosswalk, dressed as Spider-Men, and everyone's just walking around them and just like, yeah, just go around. Thanks, New York.
That's New York.
It's just so perfect.
Rachel Elizabeth Dare says, so it's Annabelle, right? And I don't know if this was intentional or not. If it was intentional, amazing move by Rachel Elizabeth Dare. If it was not intentional, worst way to open this conversation ever. Annabeth says, Annabeth, do you always dress in gold? Amazing interchange. And specifically with the Annabeth, in a recent, by the time this comes out, episode of Meddling Adults, I had to do a retake because there was something that said Annabelle doll, and I kept calling it an Annabeth doll after the first couple of times. So I had to do a months later audio retake of it. So if you hear a couple of the times that I say Annabelle, it sounds slightly different. That is why. A peek behind the curtain.
But yeah, I love this whole exchange. I feel like, to me, Rachel is just pretty unbothered. Or at least she's just kind of rolling with the punches with all this bizarre stuff going on.
Yeah.
So I think almost Annabeth's jabs aren't as... there's a lot more to take in than just the jab. We'll see.
Right. I don't think Rachel Elizabeth Dare is trying to poke the bear or provoke the beast.
Yeah.
I think she is just semi-oblivious to the situation. Rachel Elizabeth Dare says she doesn't usually dress up in gold. This is just a fundraiser because art programs are getting cut from elementary schools. Rachel Elizabeth Dare is a saint. She figures that they don't want to hear her talk about that. And she asks Annabeth, you're a half-blood too, right? And Annabeth freaks, saying, why don't you just blab it to the whole world? And Rachel Elizabeth Dare stands up and does announce it to the whole coffee shop. Nobody moves. She sits back down and basically says, see, nobody cares. New York, baby!
Have you ever seen Jurassic Park?
Yes.
It's like the scene where they're first getting like the Barbasol can, and he's just like, hey! Nobody cares.
Annabeth says that it's not funny and this isn't a joke. Percy tells them to calm down. Rachel Elizabeth Dare says that she's calm, especially because every time she's around Percy, a monster attacks. So what's there to be nervous about? Percy apologizes for the band room incident, says he hopes she didn't get in trouble. Rachel Elizabeth Dare says that she didn't, but she did get questioned a ton. Thankfully, she didn't rat him out. Specifically, Rachel Elizabeth Dare says, I played dumb. And Annabeth says, was it hard? Which, using the word dumb aside, that's fantastic. Yeah. Annabeth is firing on all cylinders.
Just so mad.
Gosh, what a reply. What a quip. Percy tells Annabeth to stop and tells Rachel Elizabeth Dare that they need her help. She is surprised, asks Annabeth if that's true. Annabeth admits it, but not in a very happy way. She goes, yeah, maybe. Percy reveals the plan. Rachel Elizabeth Dare says, so you want me to guide you through a place I've never been? Percy says that she can see through the mist like Ariadne, so he bets that she can see the correct path. She asks what if he's wrong and that she can't see the way. Percy says that they'll get lost, but honestly, it's going to be dangerous either way. She asks if she could die. Percy says yes, and she says that she thought monsters didn't care about mortals. Percy lets her know that Luke is different. He doesn't really go by the same rules, and he would kill anyone that gets in his way. To this, Rachel Elizabeth Dare replies, "Nice guy." She's great. Oh, she's great.
She's so funny.
Annabeth says, "He's under the influence of a Titan. He's been deceived." And I said, "Don't make excuses." Come on, Annabeth. Rachel Elizabeth Dare looks back and forth at the team and then says that she is in. Percy thought that it would take more convincing. He asks if she's sure, and she says that her summer was going to be boring, and this is the best opportunity for excitement that she's heard, so she's all aboard the plan.
What I love so much about this segment, though, is, she tells him she's in. The rest of the summer is going to be boring. But all she does is she pulls out a freaking hairbrush. She's like pulling a Mike Schubert here. I'm staring at your comb right here in the recording booth. And it's hilarious to me because it's just like, she goes to all this trouble to paint herself gold so much. And then she still somehow has a hairbrush stuck in this outfit somewhere, which is hilarious to me.
You gotta look good when you're out in public. I always either have a comb in my pocket or a brush in my backpack.
Yeah.
Never leave home without it. I totally get it. Rachel Elizabeth Dare asks what to look for. Annabeth says that they need to find an entrance. The only one that they know of is in Camp Half-Blood, but Rachel Elizabeth Dare can't go there because Camp Half-Blood is off limits to mortals. And narrator Percy notes that when Annabeth says mortals, she says it like it's a condition that she should be ashamed of having. Rachel Elizabeth Dare is unfazed, and she simply asks what an entrance to the labyrinth looks like. Annabeth says that it could be anything. All it needs is a glowing blue delta. She draws it in water on the table to check if she knows the symbol to which they're referring. Annabeth confirms, asking her, "Do you know Greek?" And Rachel Elizabeth Dare says no. So my guess here is that she's seen one before. And that's basically what it is. She says that she has to get changed. She tells them to come with her to the Marriott. Annabeth asks why. And she says because she's seen that symbol in the hotel basement where they store their costumes. That is the end of this chapter and the end of this episode of The Newest Olympian. How you feeling?
Dude, I'm feeling great. This book is so good. I'm glad to get back on the mic with you. It's been a while since we've gotten to do this.
Yeah.
And things are happening. I'm excited for you to see where the rest of this goes, and I'm excited for the rest of the listeners to come on this journey with you, man.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's a good chapter. This was a fun one. This was a good palate cleanser to the very sad chapter 12. Nothing really bad happened. We had some sad dreams, but the fact that Rachel Elizabeth Dare is back and Annabeth being sassy and us getting to see Sally, there was lots of stuff to make me feel better and more hyped. And going into chapter 14, I'm ready to see what happens. The chapter title is very intriguing, and I'm excited to see who it's referring to and what goes down. But until then, is there anything you want to promote to the folks out there? Anything to shout out? You already did your medical ramblings.
Yeah. Let's see. Like you said, I'm not much of a content creator, so I mean, like always, check out Mike's other stuff. Meddling Adults just came back.
Yeah, season 4 is back, baby.
I've been on season 2. It's a great show. You should always check it out. Like I said, sometimes I hop on this podcast called Render Me This from time to time. It's just sort of a looking at cartoon worlds and seeing if we would ever want to live in them ourselves. Oh, something that's kind of neat. One of my good friends has she started like a book Instagram.
Oh,
cool. I think it's cool. It's like she's joining book Instagram. It's called Pages on Pages.
Okay, nice.
I'll give the spelling of that when they post it, and we'll put it in the episode description or something.
I'm assuming her name is Paige.
Her name is Paige.
Pages on Pages.
Yes, Pages on Pages. It's super cool. She does a lot of like LGBT book reviews, and she gets a lot of arcs in advance, and and she's a person of color as well, so it's like a really great thing to look into and just see interesting stuff. She also posts pictures of her corgi, so that's kind of cool.
Win all around.
Yeah.
And if you want to see more Mike and Steven content, that aforementioned Hades stream was a very fun time. Johnny was there. Kelly was there. Had some interesting outcomes. I'm not going to give away the spoiler, but both streams are up on the Patreon. They're available for any patron. So go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon, join up, watch it, have a good time. Thank you so much for joining, Stephen. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, as we see what the heck is going on as we return to the labyrinth, until then, I'll see you later.
Bye.
Thank Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor is Sherry Guo. The music is by Bettina Campomanes and Brandon Grugel, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you love the show, you're all caught up on the show, and you just can't get enough, you should check out our Patreon, where you can get access to loads of bonus content, bonus episodes, bloopers, director's commentary, monthly Q&A live streams. All sorts of good stuff lives at thenewsolympian.com/Patreon. And if you want to rep the show, you can get some merch at thenewsolympian.com/merch. If you want to be part of a larger community, you can join the Patreon, get access to our Discord, but you can also check us out on social media. We're at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We have a subreddit, reddit.com/r/thenewsolympian. We even have a TikTok account that Sherry runs. It's at Newest Olympian, and lots of good stuff on social media. This show wouldn't be possible without our patrons, and I want to give a shout out to our Ultra God tier patrons: Lotta Bartova, Kelsey Gillespie, The Damn Steam Nuggets, Vicky Garcia, Ellie Hoskovchova, Veronica Bartova, Haley Hastings, Robin Garcia, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Olivia Y, Craig McRoberts, Taylor Payne, Giselle Salvador, Peter Johnson the Twin, Sabrina Balsiger, Boney Pony, Heather McMillan, Casey Williams, Polly Burge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Bridget Lowry, Josh Sayer, Josh Wilkie, Abby Ryan, Wise Girl, Ashton Gabrielson, Marco Redhouse, Falcon, Joey James, Christopher William Boucher, Caden Mack, Sam Reeby, Carly Allen, Riley Kiedis, Mary Kelly, Audra, Mackenzie, Mrs. O'Leary, Aaron Wood, Rodith Kalna, Milo Kim, Fred Cabras, Harlan Christ, Cece Reeds 23, Sandkoff, Julia Kendall, Emil Oscar Thomason, Liz Cardigan, Michelle Spurgeon, Zachary Hamilton, Sarah Neal, Ricky, Francesca Pacheco, John Drillsma, Demigod Nurse, Rayla Matthews, Riley Draken, and Luna Cadu. If you want to help out the show in a non-monetary way, tell a friend about the show. That really helps a ton. Reach out to someone directly and say, hey, you love Percy Jackson, or hey, you've been looking for an excuse to read Percy Jackson. There's this podcast. It's very good. The host is very humble. You could also talk about us on social media or leave us a rating and review on whatever podcast app you're using. All these things help, and I really appreciate all of you who have done that or will do it in the future. But I'm just so thankful that you tuned into this episode, and I hope you tuned into our next episode, where we will be joined live in San Diego by my buddy Grant Ron as we cover chapter 14 of the Battle of the Labyrinth. But until then, I'll see you later. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's me, ASMR Mike. So for this ASMR Mike segment, I'm going to let Kelly work in the background to her fullest desire, and you will hear the clicking and clacking of an architect hard at work. Don't be shy. Very normal typing. Thank you so much for listening.